Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS current affair analysis for 20th August 2020, and these are the articles we'll be dealing today. The first article for the day is taken from the Hindu and it is titled Content Powers in the People's Name. So for the past few days we have been hearing a lot of news about Advocate Prashant Bhushan's tweets and the contempt of court case. Recently, the Supreme Court has convicted Mr. Prashant Bhushan and held him accountable for tarnishing the image of the court in public eyes. So, what is the justification offered for contempt of court? Is it to protect judges? No. If you take a look at the judgment and the justification given out, even though this is technically correct and legally correct, it is one thing that we have to understand is did it actually uplift the confidence that people have on the courts? So what Mr. Bhushan basically did was he criticized the judges. So the argument given in favor of slapping contempt of court cases against Prashant Bhushan was that if people start believing what Mr. Bhushan said, it will tarnish the image and credibility that courts have. Now, the question that this article writer is asking is, did the contempt proceedings actually build confidence amongst people, or is it giving us a feeling that the court is trying to subjugate criticism against it? That is the central question asked in this article. It is known that rule of law is very central for having credibility of any institution in our country. Supreme Court, which proclaims itself to be the central pillar of democracy, has put this contempt of court case at the center of a controversy, and thereby the author believes that the institution's credibility has taken a hit because of this judgment. There is also a reason why he says this, because the Supreme Court has been very reluctant in certain cases, like for example the habeas corpus petitions, or in the context of CAA, the petitions that were filed in the context of Article 370 and Jammu Kashmir issue. There were also certain reservations exhibited by the court when we are talking about the plight of millions of poor migrant workers, and the stay of payment of wages order during the time of pandemic. All this gave a sense that Supreme Court is no longer pro people and the rule of law is not being followed, according to the article writer. We know that the Contempt of Courts Act 1971 divides contempt into two kinds, that is civil and the other one is criminal. So it is generally noted that these criminal contempt cases are used extensively ever since the A.K. Gopalan era itself, that happened in 1950. So it is time to relook at this criminal contempt of court cases and try to reform the law. In various cases like the Kedarnath case of 1962 or the Shiv Shankar case of 1988 or Rachapudi Subbarao case of 2004. So it is very important to remember these case names because this would add value to your mains answers. So please take a note of these cases. So in all these cases, the Supreme Court essentially held that criticism of the court does not impair and hamper the administration of justice. So in simple words, it says that just because the court and the judges are being criticized, it will not stop the court from delivering justice, and ideally the court should be open for constructive criticism. So without this aspect of criticism, there would not be any possibility of reviewing the old judgments. So if you take a look at various judgments, like say the case of Puttaswamy judgment that came out in 2017, or all the landmark judgments which overruled the previous conception of laws, it is because of the constructive criticism of the court. So without such possibility, how can we move forward as a society? That is the central question that is being raised in this article. The next article for the day is taken from the Indian Express and it is titled her right to property. This article is in the context of the Supreme Court order on co-parcenary rights. Now, before getting into the specifics of this article, let us try to understand certain frameworks in which we have to talk about rights issues. In the broader context of rights, we are specifically talking about women's rights, and we're talking about the aspect of gender equality. Now, when we are talking about gender, we have to understand that gender is a social construct. In Indian society and across the world, gender manifests itself in three different levels. So, the first manifestation of the concept of gender is the identity. Now, whenever we talk about identity, we are basically referring to the biological concept. So, the difference between gender and the sex of the person is the fact that this is a biological concept, whereas gender is a social concept. So, the identity basically stems from the biological identity. The second manifestation is the perception towards a gender in a particular culture. So there might be societies which celebrates the braveness of women, but if there are societies which kind of typecast some stereotypes upon women or some expectations from men, then that will decide the gender's perception in that culture. The third one we are talking about is the structural level. Now, what do I mean by the structural identity of a gender? So, it talks about the position occupied by a gender in a society with respect to their occupation or economic activity. So, for example, in India, traditionally women are expected to be homemakers, and women participating in labor force is treated as a taboo in rural India in many places. Of late, we have been seeing a activity or a phenomena of feminization of agriculture. This is not because the families are becoming progressive and allowing women to work, but because these jobs are very low paying, and since the husbands of these women are migrating to other places to support their families, women are being employed in low paying jobs of agriculture. So this is the basic concept of gender. Now, when we're talking about gender equality, we have to overcome the challenges thrown at every single level. So we have to fight those stereotypes. We have to fight the patriarchal structure, which is considered a salient feature of Indian society. Patriarchal society is considered a salient feature because even though this setup is universal to the Indian context, it manifests different levels at different levels of society. So we have in the Indian context tribal patriarchy, Dalit patriarchy, Brahminical patriarchy. All these are different with respect to each other. So it is in this context that the Mitakshara law school becomes very important in our discussion. So the term Mitakshara is derived from the name of a commentary written by Vigneshwara on the Yajnavalkya Smriti. It is observed in all parts of India and subdivided into various schools like Banaras, Mithila, Maharashtra, Dravida. So as per this traditional school of law, a son by birth acquires an interest in the ancestral property of the joint family, but there is little to talk about women in this context. So again, this is a patriarchal setup that has manifested into our democratic law system because of the Hindu Code Bill, which has been inspired from this school of thought. So a co-partner share is not defined and cannot be disposed of as per Mitakshara school of law. So as per this, a wife cannot demand partition but has the right to a share in any partition between her husband and her sons. So in a way, women are given a secondary status in this school of thought. So this has been challenged in the Supreme Court because basically in 2005 there has been a Hindu Code Bill amendment which said that even daughters are equally entitled for inheriting the property of their parents. Now there was a confusion. So the confusion was regarding the date from which this amendment would start applying from. Is it because of the amendment that this right will come into the picture, or is it because historically women have been subjected to patriarchal setup, they are being denied this retrospectively? So there was a demand that even before 2005, Hindu Code Bill came up in 1955-56. So the petitioners who argued that historically women have lost a lot because of this conception of Mitakshara school, that women don't have the right for a parent's property. The argument was in favor of women getting the right retrospectively. Now this confusion has been taken to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has delivered a result finally. So recently on August 12th, the Supreme Court ruled that a Hindu woman's right to be a joint heir to the ancestral property is by birth. So that means any cutoff date is not at all applicable. It is same for both men and women, that is from 1955 and 56 when this bill came into existence. The Supreme Court expanded and promoted the amendments done in 2005, which removed any sort of discrimination as contained in the Section 6 of the Hindu Succession Act 1956, and gave equal rights to daughters also. However, there are also certain issues. The first one amongst them is the concept of Stridan. As per this concept, it is very much legal for a daughter to acquire property before marriage and carry it over forward. But the problem is, this would eventually lead to a possibility of becoming an unethical practice of dowry. We have to remember that dowry continues in one form or the other despite having such strong anti-dowry laws. So the second issue that the author is trying to raise is that of implementation. So even though the law is very honest in its intention, unless and until the implementation aspect is taken care of, it would not be actually substantive justice, because in the present setup we know that patriarchal society is a reality in our country. Now it is very likely that the male heirs who are hell-bent on keeping their property would not be willing to part away with the property, especially in the context if women are not staying at their ancestral place. The reason being, the cost of litigation in our country is very high, and more or less it is very likely that a lot of women would drop out from claiming this property in a fear of litigation and the headaches that it causes. So we have to understand that whatever the law proposes is a basic expectation from the society, but what nudges the people to behave and comply with such kind of laws is behavioral therapy or behavioral change. Now we need strong leadership to bring about this behavioral change and attitude formations in society. The challenge for economically dependent women in rural areas and who are not educated, who do not have the kind of dignity, is ensuring that their rights are secured by proper implementation. Even if that doesn't change, there should be a proper recourse to judiciary, and this will ensure that the rights of women are encouraged. This will happen only when the litigation process is streamlined and people start trusting the courts that faster justice will be delivered. That is the gist of this article. So that's it for the day. Thank you.